Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and homemaker. Come along with me as I share my love for simple living, growing in my allotment garden, diving into what it means to be an urban homesteader and embracing life as a mother and homemaker. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. Today's episode I'm super excited about. I know, I say every time, but I am excited to delve into this because this is going to be a little bit behind the scenes about me and I guess why we decided to start embracing slow and simple living and just why we went from hustle culture and to a very rushed hustle type life to a more slow and simple life. And so I want to share with you our family's complete transition from that, where it came from, why we decided to follow it, and everything along the way. So we're going to dive straight in. Before I continue though, there is a absolute windstorm ripping outside. It's like 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. So if you hear that sort of going on in the background, apologies. I don't think my microphone's going to be that sensitive, but just in case you do, that's what's going on today while I'm recording. So let's get on with it. So I said that I was going to talk about moving from a more hustle culture based busy lifestyle to a more traditional simple life, and it's been a really sort of ongoing transition for our family and not one that had originally had any intention, and it was something that just sort of really happened naturally. So let's rewind, I don't know, trying to think how far to go back really, but let's go back, let's say 8 years. So 8 years ago was almost coming up to getting married, and which is crazy by the way, but we were engaged, we were planning our wedding, and we were heading towards that line in the sand where we were going to get married, and we were also looking for a home together. Now we actually didn't, fun fact about us, we didn't actually live together for very long at all before we got married. And I know people always say like, oh, you have to live with someone before you marry them. I don't necessarily believe that's true, because we didn't, and we're about to celebrate, we're coming up to our 8-year anniversary, so it is what it is. We lived together a really short period of time before we got married. We was already engaged, wedding was already planned, all of that stuff. And so we moved into our first place together. We rented a flat, and we had intentions to buy somewhere, but we didn't really know where, what we were looking for, and we weren't really sort of financially ready right at that point anyway. So we wanted to get our wedding out of the way and all of that. Now, completely random and off topic, but it just sprung to my mind as I was saying it. Like, that wasn't because we were spending a boatload on our wedding. We actually didn't spend a boatload on our wedding, and it's really interesting that really looking back, that might be where my desire for simplicity showed itself at first, maybe, although I think there have been signs like far longer than that. But I really didn't want a sort of traditional wedding. I didn't want something where, absolutely ridiculous amounts of money was spent. I wanted everything to be well within our budget, and I just wanted it to be simple. I didn't want a very over-the-top wedding. I didn't want an over-the-top dress. I didn't want over-the-top bridesmaids' dresses. I just wanted everything to feel simple and relaxed and about us getting married and not about all the extras. So I guess it's not completely off topic, but it's just that point where, I sort of realised that I really, really wanted simplicity. And then once we sort of got married and we lived in our home, I wouldn't say we necessarily embraced a simple life. I would say our life was a bit more fast-paced, a bit more hectic, and there were things like, and I will always pin back to this because I think this is sometimes the definition of hustle culture for me is I used to be part of multi-level marketing. Now, if you're a long-time listener, you'll know that I do not speak fondly on multi-level marketing, but at the time I was involved in multi-level marketing, and that is the opposite of a slow and simple life, and it is the absolute epitome of hustle culture. It's hustling non-stop, it's wearing busy as a badge of honor, it's just working all the time. And while people in multi-level marketing will tell you, like, oh, you can work anywhere, what they don't tell you is they have to work anywhere and everywhere. And 99.6% of people don't even make any money. But this isn't a multi-level marketing podcast. But I just wanted to stick that in there because it is sort of like the definition of when my life was more fast-paced and more hectic. And, at the time my husband worked a different job than he does now. He was going back and forth to the office all the time, not massively away from, like, too far from home, but there's a commute. There is just sort of like this sort of rigid nature to that, and life was just busier. And we were often always on the go and doing things, whether that be work-related stuff or whether we were just out doing stuff, visiting places, seeing friends and family, which there's nothing wrong with any of that, but as it has to be balanced. And these things can really take a toll on your well-being. And at the time as well, we were going through a bit of a stressful situation with our where we lived and with our landlord, and it was just awful. Maybe I'll do a podcast about all of the living traumas that I've had to go through. In fact, I'm just going to make a note of that now, like living traumas, because there have been 3 to my knowledge, and like I said, I'm not going to go into them now, but I definitely think I'm going to record an episode on that. And so life was busy, life was hectic. We were caught up in this idea that being busy equaled being productive, and we just didn't necessarily love every second. Like, I actually look back on our first year of marriage when we lived in that flat, and it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, but we had that desire for more of a simple life. And I just think at some point we realised that our current lifestyle just wasn't aligned with our values, and it took a while. It wasn't, that was 2016, and we got married at the very beginning of 2016, and it took a little while for us to really sort of fully embrace living simply, but it happened bit by bit. And so me being part of multi-level marketing, like I said, it was a huge swing in the other direction from where we're at now. It's very culty, it's very hustle-like, it's very always being busy, always being on, always learning, always doing this, always doing that, and there isn't that allowance for a slow and simple life. They just don't mesh well together. I mean, ultimately, don't join a multi-level marketing company. But I think when I left multi-level marketing and I started to look at how problematic multi-level marketing really was and started to really unpick it, that I decided that, wow, this is not the life that I wanted to lead, and it swung me the other way into a more simple life and had that desire for more simplicity. And so I left multi-level marketing at the very, very beginning of 2019, but really hadn't done anything for about the previous 6 months, so like mid 2018. And I made the decision finally that I was, not going to renew in 2019. And that actually coincided with the birth of my first child. And you can go and listen to other podcast episodes where I've discussed multi-level marketing in far more depth. But I would say after I left and after I started unpicking it, it took probably a good year to really sort of understand what I'd been through in multi-level marketing, it is very cult-like, and it does take a lot of work to unpick that. And it was once I was through that I realised that actually this desire for a slow and simple life was really where, really aligned with my core values. And ultimately, and coincidentally as well, because I had my first child at the beginning of 2019, I had that year away from work on maternity leave, and I just got into sort of like this different headspace. Having a first child is wow, but also, I wanted different things out of life, and I wanted different things out of life for my family. And then I didn't really know whether I was going to return to work after my maternity leave, but if you're very good at doing maths and you've already figured this out, I had a baby early 2019, had a year's maternity leave, left multi-level marketing also early 2019. Took me about a year to unpick it, which brings us nicely round to the beginning of the pandemic. And I really often say this, and if you've listened to previous episodes, whether it be solo episodes of myself or episodes that I've done with guests, you will know that so much comes back to the pandemic. So much. In fact, I've really noticed a trend, the more and more guests that I've had on this show, that the pandemic is really this massive line in the sand for so many people. And particularly when we talk about slow and simple living, it is a huge, huge, huge line in the sand where people were like, I'm not going to live like that anymore. And I think it's because, if you think back, if you feel that you're able, if you think back to that time, everything was so uncertain during that first lockdown, and, we didn't know what we faced, and we couldn't see a future that wasn't the present. We couldn't see a time where we wouldn't be so worried about COVID, or a time where we wouldn't feel that, we were living under restrictions. And now we're obviously here, and we've been here for a while. But it's funny, like, I really couldn't imagine that at some points of the pandemic. Like, I couldn't imagine that one day we would be back to normality and we wouldn't be wearing masks and all sorts of things, like, I really couldn't envision that for a period of time. And especially during the first lockdown, but I think through all lockdowns, I very much came home to myself. I'm very much an introverted person anyway, and being home was okay for me. It was easier in the first lockdown, I think, than the subsequent two. The subsequent two as well, I was pregnant for a second time, and there was lots going on in general throughout the pandemic for all of us. But yeah, particularly during that first lockdown, really came home to myself, and there were so many things that that I think we took for granted that suddenly were taken away from us. And I don't just mean that in the sense of like being able to socialise and, meet other people and just live a normal life. I mean, things like, and I'll refer back to this often, like, purchasing our groceries from the shop, right? So one of the first things we did was, stop doing that. I mean, ever since we had our first child, we were online shoppers anyway, but we would top up at the shop. So it was like that complete stop of doing that. And it's really difficult to get online delivery slots, wasn't it, in those early days of the pandemic? I mean, I remember sitting up till like midnight to wait for the next lot of slots to come on, and then that was not happening. Like, at first that's when they would be released, but then it wasn't happening then. Like, it was potluck. And we had all of our shopping for our family, so me, my husband and my daughter, and then we had it for our relatives as well. So technically on one shop, at the worst points, we had for 4 households, and so we would just have that one slot. We would order, so we weren't taking up multiple slots. We would sort the shopping, and then we would like drop it off on doorsteps, and it was a mad time. But it really sort of made me think, or begin to think about things like, how can we preserve what we have? How can we make things from what we've got? How can I start baking bread? So, it's not easy to get bread. And, there were some things that were limited. You could only get certain amounts of so many things. And it was just chaos. I remember, on our online shop, you couldn't get more than 3 of the same item. So at some points we were having a shopping delivery, and then we didn't have another one booked for another 2 weeks, and it was like, everybody has got to survive for 2 weeks on this shop. How can we make that happen? And so that's when I really got into baking bread more, and just really using all of our resources that we have at home. And also, at the time my daughter was in nappies, and we used cloth anyway, so that was a really easy part of the pandemic. We didn't have to worry about being able to get nappies or being able to get wipes, because we used cloth already. And so those things were a lot easier. But it just brought home to me that how much we relied on so much external stuff, and how there were so many things that we could do. Baking bread is just a minor example of how we can sort of be more sustainable and just really live within our means, within our home, and not have to rely on too much. Now, I don't live off grid, nowhere close, right? And so, I do have to rely on those modern conveniences. And I'm not going to sit here while recording a podcast connected to the internet, sitting with my laptop plugged into the electricity, and tell you that I don't appreciate modern convenience, because I absolutely do. I love that I can run my business and my podcast through the internet. I love that I have a dishwasher that will wash my dishes for me. I love that I have a washing machine that will wash my clothes. There is so much about modern living that I am not going to, sit here and be a hypocrite over. But I loved the simplicity of some of those age-old ancestral traditions, like just the longevity of making bread, and just being at one, growing. That was the year that I really, really kicked off my sort of balcony growing. I'd done it ever since we moved in, but I went really hardcore that year because, well, I guess there was nothing else to do. And we had, I'm sure you remember, we had an absolutely wonderful spring and summer that year. And so it just enabled me to sort of really embrace some of the really simple traditions that we can do inside our home. And we were able to recycle things more, reuse things more. We were able to use our resources and use our ingredients more, and not rely on that sort of fast paced nature that we can often find in modern society when it comes to convenience. And it also gave me time. I had nothing to do and nowhere to be, and I did some work. I actually decided, I wasn't sure whether I was going to go back to work after maternity leave, but then, straight into a pandemic when things were just so unstable, I felt like actually this is a really good point to, any kind of second income will be helpful here. So I just sort of restarted a little bit of what I'd done prior. I'd always been self-employed, so I found it very easy. But other than that, I just spent time at home on my balcony in the sunshine, enjoying the simple life with my daughter. And while I am so happy that those days are behind us in terms of the pandemic, through rose-tinted glasses, they were some really great days. And they were some really horrendous days as well. And not diminishing the effects of the pandemic, because it was vast. But like I said, looking through rose-tinted glasses, some of that simplicity was some really good times, and made me sort of head out on the journey that I've been on ever since. And so, when the pandemic was, I won't say over, but, when things were sort of easing and restrictions were easing, there was this constant talk about getting back to normal. And I remember thinking to myself, but I don't want to. I don't want to go back to that normal of busy, of hustling, of, everybody having to be in the office from 9 to 5, not being able to work from home, this ratio of work-life balance, all of these things, the way we relied on certain things, the way we're expected to be part of this consumer-based society where, we spend money because capitalism requires it of us. And I just remember thinking, like, nothing about that old life appeals to me anymore, and I just don't want to go back to it. And that was the point, I think, that myself and my husband realised that our lifestyle prior to the pandemic and our lifestyle that had sort of developed during the pandemic, they weren't aligned together. And the way we thought about our life and how we wanted to go forward wasn't where we'd been. And so that, I guess, was a huge catalyst that motivated us to, start making a change. And, we'd already made so many massive changes. What it really was us saying, like, when the world goes back to normal, we're not going back to normal, quote unquote normal, with it, because that life doesn't suit us. And like I said earlier, when I have these conversations on my podcast with guests, so much of it comes back to the pandemic. For so many people, the pandemic was that line in the sand where they realised, no, I don't want to live like that anymore. And the way I've been living, this is more suitable to me. Like people having the flexibility to work from home, people maybe working in a more hybrid capacity, like, where jobs are able. I appreciate that not everybody can work in that capacity, but people discovering that they had such a better work-life balance, and that their lifestyle balance felt so much better. And I think it made people think, like, what have we been doing? Because when we all were given a moment to just pause and stop, we were like, actually, this feels so much better. And so it's been a journey for us ever since. So we have really completely taken to a slow and simple lifestyle. And for us, that has included like decluttering our home. So we always thought that we would move from here, and sometimes we and ah over it. We live in a small home. We live in a small 2-bedroom split level flat. We have a balcony, and then externally we also have an allotment in the town that we live in, so not too far, just a couple of minutes down the road. And those things are enough for us. Maybe one day we will move, but at the moment it's just not on the radar. And so, decluttering our home and making it actually somewhere that we don't feel like we're growing out of, because it's not that we're growing out of our home. There's plenty of space for all of us, all 4 of us in our home, plus the cat. And what often makes us feel that way is we just have too much stuff. So sometimes decluttering and just being more minimal can really, really help. Like, you don't have to be a minimalist. I'm definitely not a minimalist, but it's just taking that time to declutter and just fit into your space. So we can absolutely do it. We can absolutely fit into small spaces, and it's often our stuff and things we hold on to that maybe we don't necessarily need that actually gives us that feeling like we've grown out of the space. So we decluttered and we just reevaluated our priorities and just started, or continued really embracing a more simpler lifestyle. And that's moved on to so many different things. It's sort of opened our eyes more to living more seasonally, and just living with the rhythms of nature, being more at one with nature. Having a balcony garden, a successful balcony garden for 6 years was amazing, but actually having the allotment and having that even deeper connection with nature is amazing. And I think, our family dynamics, our relationships, our overall well-being have been really, really influenced positively by switching to a more simple lifestyle. And, it's changed the nature of what I do. It's given life to things like this podcast where I talk about slow living. It's given life to a new sort of career for me in like slow, simple and seasonal living, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and all of those things, and just like bringing that all together into this sort of bundle that is the Slow Living Collective, I guess. So embracing a more simple lifestyle has had so many positive impacts and benefits for our family, and so I thought I would just share some of those and why I think they're so important. And so I really think for the most part it has reduced our day-to-day stress, because when you are able to simplify so much in your life and slow down, it does help minimize the overwhelm and the stress. Now, I'm not saying you don't get stressed, because stressful stuff still happens. A lot of stressful stuff has happened in the previous, like, I don't know, stemming back several years, right? Ever since we embraced this lifestyle, so many different things have happened that have been incredibly stressful. But it helps just minimize the daily stresses. Because you're eliminating, distractions, and you're not over committing to things and like packing your schedule full of stuff. Your house isn't so cluttered, so you don't feel overwhelmed in that area, and you're just creating this sort of calmer and more peaceful environment. And that obviously really enhances your well-being, because it allows you to really focus on what really matters, and that overall will just give you this sort of greater sense of well-being and contentment. But also, I've particularly found that it really has helped encourage me to sort of delve into things like self-care and mindfulness and self-reflection, and some of those things really do help improve sort of like your mental health, as well as like emotional and physical health as well. And for me as well, it encouraged me to take what was a fairly long period of time that I'd been really interested in yoga, and actually turn it around and become a yoga teacher. So that's something I qualified in at the beginning of this year. So these things have led me down different routes that I never thought were really possible. And something else I think Living Simply has given us as a family is just more time and more freedom, because we have, less in our schedule and more boundaries. So, we've freed up so much time, and that just gives you freedom. Because we are able to, like I just said, invest that time in pursuing passions that maybe we didn't realise we wanted to pursue. I was able to take that time and put it towards learning yoga. I think as well, something about living more simply, I think, is also connected to the environment and the environmental impact that we have, because what we try and do by living a simple lifestyle is consume less and just being more mindful of our footprint, whether that's our digital footprint, our ecological footprint, our food footprint, all of these things. We try and make sustainable choices in every area, and hopefully live a little more of an environmentally friendly lifestyle. But like I said, it really has just sort of aligned with our values and just our really core values, and we are able to live much more intentionally, more consciously, and we're able to make choices that really resonate with who we are as people. And so if you want to get started, I thought I would maybe just give you some tips on, if you're thinking like, oh yes, like I remember the pandemic and how I felt like I didn't want to go back to normal, and somehow, we've slipped back there. So if you're interested in maybe transitioning to a more simple life, here are a few tips that you can maybe take away. So reflect on why you want a simple life. What is it in your life that's making it feel like it's not simple? Because once you sort of define that, you will have a real understanding, and that will help you just guide you and move to and transition to that more simple life. And decluttering is so huge in simplicity. So I talk about it a lot, and like I often come at it, I guess, from the sense of like I live in a small home, but it's also a massive part of simplicity, because when you declutter your physical space and you let go of things that don't serve you a purpose anymore, then you will only be keeping the things that truly add value to your life. And then you're just letting go of the rest. And that is a great tip for all areas of your life. Let go of the things that don't serve you a purpose anymore or bring you any joy, and only keep what adds value to your life. And this one might not be that popular, but I have found it so helpful. Streamline your schedule. Evaluate what your commitments and obligations are. And, don't do things that you don't want to do. Say no if you have to, and just focus on the things that really align with your priorities. I never jam-pack my week anymore. Sometimes there would be weeks where I was like, oh, I'm going here, I'm going there, I'm seeing this person, I'm seeing that person, and I absolutely want to see this person and that person, but maybe not in the same week. My weeks are busy. Even living simply, my weeks are busy. I am a stay-at-home mum and business owner to 2 small children that are 2 and 4. Like, my life is busy, and I have to schedule in that time for rest as well. So I know what my week generally looks like, and I always allow for time where I am just at home, and we are just at home, and we are just resting and relaxing, and there is no obligation on us. And so that, I think, is a really good place to start. Just streamline what you do and just give yourself much more grace. But also, another good one is just being really mindful in your consumption. Listen, like I said earlier, consumerism and capitalism absolutely rules our modern society. So when you adopt a bit of a more mindful approach to your purchases, then you are going to really ask yourself if these things are necessary and whether it aligns with your values. Because the last thing we want is to declutter everything and then get caught back in the cycle, and then we have to declutter again and again. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to declutter again and again, because you absolutely are. It's an ongoing process, because things do end up coming into your house. It's just the way it goes. But if you're just a little more mindful, then you might, just consider quality over quantity. Make sure things align with your values. Consider the environmental impact of these things, and don't get pulled in by consumerism and capitalism, because they do rule, and it's very, very difficult not to be part of it. And so just embrace simplicity. Disconnect from the noise, especially digital noise. Make sure something, and I think a lot of people do this anyway, but in case you don't, remember, you don't have to show up everywhere on social media. You don't have to be on every platform. I'm not on every platform. I'm on Instagram, and that be it. And so you don't have to show up everywhere. You don't have to be checking your emails all the time. You don't have to have your notifications always turned on. I absolutely turn everything off on my phone. There are no notifications. There are nothing, except phone calls. So if somebody needed me urgently, I want to be able to be got hold of. But the rest of the time, that nothing is gonna hurt if you don't check your Instagram notifications, or whether you don't go on Twitter. And I know it can be really, really difficult, but you can maybe have digital free zones in your house, or periods in the day where you don't use your devices, or maybe you don't bring devices into your bedroom at night and things like that. So, for example, one thing we have never done in the entire time we have been married and have lived together, we have never, ever, ever had a television in our bedroom, ever. And we never, ever would. There is no benefit to it. It is negative for our health to have that sort of spectrum of blue light in our room. And the only time we're in bed anyway is when we're going to go to sleep, or in the hours before going to sleep. If you're in your room resting, don't be watching television. It's so not good for you in your sleep. So just disconnect from the digital and reconnect with nature. I promise you, just a simple walk, sitting in the park. Nature is, the opposite of busyness in the modern world, and it really helps sort of calm everything down. So before I round out this episode, I wanted to talk to you guys about some common misconceptions about slow and simple living and how we can get around them. And because there are loads of challenges and misconceptions, so let's just dive into it. So the first one is so many people get FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. And you've probably heard me talk about this multiple times, but let's ditch FOMO and go for JOMO. So JOMO is the joy of missing out. I have a whole episode on it, so I will link it in the notes. You can go back and listen to it. But you need to start shifting your mindset from fear and start embracing the joy of missing out. Because when you focus on the present moment, you're just better able to savor the experiences, and you feel less pressure to be everywhere and do everything. So another challenge is social pressure. Now, this is a big one because do you know what? The world doesn't live slowly. And so actually, although more and more people are opting to live a slow and simple life, we are more in the minority. So just stay true to your values and your priorities, even if they differ from societal norms. And when you surround yourself with people who think the same, supportive, like-minded people who understand and appreciate your choice to live a slower life, then, I think you'll feel sort of more able to fight against the judgment, I guess. And, if you don't know anyone in your real life, head on to Instagram. Everybody can find their community somewhere on Instagram. So just look up slow living or simple living. Now, finding time for everything. So the best thing is to just identify what your priorities are and let go of anything that's non-essential. So like I said earlier, simplify your schedule. Say no to commitments that you either don't want to go to or are unnecessary, and only focus on things that align with your values and your goals. So another big challenge is feeling guilty for slowing down. I don't feel guilty for slowing down, but I know some people do. So actually just recognise that slowing down is not being lazy, because I think some people think, like, when you say, I live a slow life, they think you're being lazy. And it's mad to me, because actually it's an intentional choice to actually prioritise yourself and prioritise your well-being. It's not lazy. Slowing down doesn't mean you're not doing anything. Slowing down means that you are prioritising the things that matter and letting go of everything else. So just be compassionate to yourself and accept that you sometimes need to rest and rejuvenate, and that's completely okay, and you'll feel so much better for it. So a big question I get about decluttering is getting overwhelmed with doing it. People often feel so overwhelmed, don't know where to start. So just start small, one room or one part of a room, and just start small and be consistent. And just break the task down into small, manageable steps, one area at a time, and do it regularly. And then just move on. And gradually, slowly but surely, you'll be able to create this clutter-free environment. And so another one, I guess, kind of related to like feeling guilty for slowing down, is like the fear of being unproductive. And so I think we all need to redefine what productivity is. We have this idea that being busy means we're being productive, and it's just not. Instead of measuring it just by our external accomplishments, just think of it as a more holistic idea, that it includes everything. It includes the things that we do: self-care, personal growth, nurturing our relationships. Other than that, just like I said earlier, just find a supportive community of people who will understand exactly what you feel and how to help you sort of continue to embrace a slow and simple life. So I hope that episode was helpful to go through. I hope it sparked some interest in some of you guys. I know so many people are just really interested in slowing down and simplifying and don't know where to start. So listen, if you ever want to talk about slow and simple living, you can hit me up on Instagram. I am always down for a conversation about slow and simple living. So you can either email me at hello@slowlivingcollective.com, or you could send me a message on Instagram. You can find me there at lifeonplot44, or you can send me a message on the Slow Living Collective account. That's at the Slow Living Collective. Wherever you want to find me. I mostly show up on my personal account, which is lifeonplot44. So head over, give me a follow, because I'm always down for new friends. And yeah, let's chat slow and simple living. You can also head over to the blog, which is theslowlivingcollective.com, and I think that's everything. I think it's everything I've got to tell you. So until next time, I will catch you in the next episode.